Powered by Riverside FM.
Welcome to Do Good Work Podcast, hosted by Terrell Strayhorn and Jaquin Johnson. We specialize in taking a deep dive into issues that truly matter. Each episode unpacks the challenges and opportunities facing today's leaders, from classrooms to boardrooms, offering insights that inspire real change. By redefining success, we're changing lives, empowering people everywhere to create environments where everyone feels a sense of belonging, whether at home, work, or school. So hey, sit back, relax, grab your favorite beverage, and join us as we explore the issues shaping our futures, one meaningful conversation at a time. Let's go!
Hello to everybody out there in podcast world. We are so delighted to have you join us. Welcome to another episode of Do Good Work Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, 50% of the excitement, Terrell Strayhorn, joined in the studio by my co-host,
Jaquin Johnson, the other half.
And friends, we've got a show for you tonight. Joined with us in the studio is the one, the only, Dr. Elwood Watson from East Tennessee State University. So right now where you are, whether you're on the East Coast, the West Coast, in the US or beyond, like and share this post, drop the link in the family group chat, in the work Slack channel, and get folks to join us because you want to be a part of this conversation tonight. We are really excited about all that's going to happen, and we're going to get into it. We've got a great lineup of questions, but if you have not already, we invite you to follow us at Do Good Work on all things social media, at Do Good Work on all things social media. And I'm going to kick it over to my twin on purpose, and let him walk us through our weekly exercise.
Listen, now you got some good phrases this week. What you've been drinking? So as always, you guys know who tune in weekly that each week before we start the show, we like to describe the week in one word using the first initial of our last name. So I'll kick us off because I thought about it, right?
Okay.
Because I've been using the same 7 words for the past 19 episodes. And this week I'm going to use juicy. And it's because life is, there has been many vibrant experiences, of course, deep emotions, but also moments worth savoring. It's like biting into a deep, ripe, juicy orange. So although, life is unpredictable, it's full of opportunities. I've realized as full opportunities to wake up the next day and grow and learn from the previous day. So juicy. Juicy
is your word. Okay. Well, I probably can't top that. And I actually thought about it a little bit too. I thought, first letter of your last name, at some point, which I'm going to reserve, I'm not going to use it, but I think at some point you actually get to use your last name, right? Because your last name starts with the first letter. I mean, anyway, I thought about that, but I figured I'd go with strength this week. For those who follow me on social media know that a couple days ago, I lost my dad. And so I'm here with my family and we're doing final preparations. And, it's just been at the same time that I'm sure I'm grieving and sort of processing it all. I've been really sort of inspired by the strength of my family, but strength of my mother. Oh my gosh. Who's been married to my dad for 57 years, the strength of my siblings, strength of my nieces and nephews, all coming together. And so strength, I just think, for anybody who needs to hear it, you are stronger than you will ever give yourself credit for. And you've got more grit and tenacity in you than you think. You might think this, whatever you're going through is going to wipe you out. And just like we all have, it's like when you're in that moment, hope and joy and strength stand up in you. And so strength is my word. I'm gonna hold on to it. Kick it over to you, Dr. Watson. If you had to pick a word, starts with the first letter of your last name that sort of captures the essence of your week or day, what would you do?
I would say this week has been one of political, well, wreckage as far as what's going on in the world right now. So,
Mm, mm, mm.
Ain't
That's
that
a
the truth?
word. And we're going to get into it, wreckage, but we should first let folks know who you are. So let's share his bio. You got it, Jaquin?
I do. So, Dr. Elwood Watson is a professor at East Tennessee State University. If you don't know where that's located, it's located in Johnson City, Tennessee. Put some respect out there.
What's the mascot? Go what?
Bucks.
Buccaneers.
Yeah.
Okay, go Bucks. All right, I'm sorry. Anyway.
Dr. Elwood is a historian. He's a public speaker and cultural critic. I want y'all to hear that. He's a cultural critic because we're going to hear that tonight.
Mhm.
He is the author and editor of a number of books, among them Keeping It Real, Essays on Race in Contemporary America, University of Chicago Press. And tonight we're actually going to, Terrell and I had an opportunity to read several chapters of Keeping It Real by Dr. Watson and have a couple questions just to ask him and learn more about, his words and what he thought then and how it aligns or how it kind of is similar to today's time. So you want to kick us off with the first one?
I do. Listen, wherever you're tuning in from, drop it in the chat. Y'all know how y'all do it. Type in there something, or someone's done this the past couple weeks using the first letter of your last name. What word would you share with us? No matter what platform you're on, type it in the chat, hit enter. It'll come into the studio with us. Somebody play with us tonight. Tell us what word captures the essence of your day, your moment, your week. Secondly, if you want to just share, you could also share where you're tuning in from. That's always really inspiring. So, Dr. Watson, I'm going to say it this way because we've had a couple people on. We've got some more folks lined up, but I'm wondering, are you in your office
yes,
at work?
Yes,
Wow. On Saturday at 8 p.m. We had this before. We had a scholar on, right? And
yeah,
he was in his office. We don't know how they speak in code. You can go back to the
in
episode.
Texas.
Dr. Fred Bonner from Prairie View, and he was in his office late. So before we get into the questions and prepare, tell us a little bit. Why are you in your office this late? And then we got to have a follow-up about how and when you write. But tell us, what you've been working on today.
Well, I was pretty much this time of year, a lot of my students are applying to second year grad students and even college seniors are applying to graduate programs, whether it's doctoral programs, law school, or or further education in one way or another. So I spent a lot of the day doing letters of recommendation. I kind of call them my letters of recommendation weekends. I just do nothing else but write letters of recommendations for students, and I tailor that particular letter toward that particular student. That's what I do. I use those certain weekends. I said, this is the weekends where I'll do just letters of recommendation. This was one of them. So,
That's awesome.
And that's why I was in, my office today. Like I said, and I spend, I don't spend it every single hour in my office, but, it is a place where I can, get things, but I also get things done at home pretty well too. So, but I do come write my letters of recommendation pretty much here in my office. Yes.
That's awesome. So we appreciate hearing that because we often think about place where you get work done. Sometimes it's a coffee shop, sometimes it's in your living room, sometimes it's in a formal office. And so to continue building our energy, I'll tell you this: you inspired us because we started reading, and we had an intention of reading like 1 or 2 chapters and putting that book down. And we started reading and reading and reading. And Dr. Watson, you're a good writer.
Well, thank you.
You write in a way that is unique for the Academy. That is a blend of, there's historical artifact, of course, but it's also, you can access it. So anybody who is listening, we'll be putting links to his books in our social media. Buy them. These are not books that you're not going to be able to get through. They're not going to bore you. And then some of the chapters, you clutch your pearls when you read the chapter title.
Boy, it was good. I was like, let me write this down. Hold on.
So we have questions for you, but before we go there, writing as a process, what is it for you? How do you go about it?
I guess I've been writing. I was in my high school journalism newspaper, which was called the Jolly Roger, the Melford Senior High School newspaper in Melford, Delaware. So I've always been interested in writing. I'm a syndicated columnist myself, and like I said, my articles, columns appear in newspapers across the country. Cagle Syndicate and places of that nature. And I've written for various publications over the years, magazines and things. Some of the magazines are defunct now, but I've always been interested in sharing my ideas, my voice. And so for the vast majority of my life, I've been writing, and it's because, like I said, it's just something I think it's a way to communicate with the public. It's a way to express your ideas. It's a way to have others critique you and look at your work and see if they are, some cases, are not willing to agree with you, and they will, in some cases, not hesitate to challenge your views. So and I think that writing kind of provides all those opportunities for people, to challenge, to accept, to condone, or like I said, as well. So I think writing provides a lot of those opportunities. But as far as writing is something I enjoy doing, and as academic, that's just if you're an academic that's really, I feel, conscientious, you're going to make an effort to do some types of writing, throughout your life, and I think that it's something that should be part of your of your career trajectory, to be writing at least on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm. Have you found it difficult to preserve your voice, your unique style of writing in the academy that has this sort of traditional standardized academies that it sort of demands of writers? It seems to us that you were able to really preserve your own voice, and there's a beauty in that.
Well, yes, I think I was determined to maintain my voice. I've always said, even when I started teaching, almost 3 decades ago, I wanted my work to be able to relate to the larger public. I don't believe in just writing. There is a place for high level writing, and I would like to think my writing falls into that category. But I do think there is something to be said for being able to relate to the public. I think too many academics write in very jargon, didactic style that really doesn't say anything to the public. And I'm not sure how effective that is going to be to anybody if you cannot relate to the public. And I think that is what's put academia on the defensive over the past year. I think because the argument coming from people, particularly on the right, some on the left too, is that you write this esoteric jargon, nobody can understand it, you speak to each other, it's bloated, it says really nothing. I mean, those are the kind of comments. And people who don't follow academia and who don't follow who already kind of have view academia with a jaundiced eye and are already suspicious of academics as being radical leftists to begin with, which is, a fallacy in many ways. They believe that. Okay. And I think that I was determined. I said, I want my work to be able to relate to the larger public, and it's something that's readable, something that's accessible, but yet something that is quality. And I don't think all those issues are not mutually exclusive. They can certainly all, blend together effectively. And that's one of the reasons why I said, whenever I write anything, it is going to be something that it can relate to the public as well as an academic audience. And I think that publishing companies nowadays, a lot of first things they will ask you is, when you submit a manuscript, who is the audience for this book? That is the first thing one of the first things they want to know, who is the audience? Because publishing companies, unlike the 70s and 80s, when it was like the heyday of publishing, they don't have that kind of money nowadays. You just, and if your work is didactic, if it's, unreadable, or if it's very, very niche, it doesn't mean you cannot get it published, but it's going to be probably much more, you're going to probably find some obscure press, because they don't want to put all that risk and all that timing and all that marketing into that book for very minimal dividends. Publishing is like anything else. It's about dollar bills. They want to make money off these books. So, I mean, it's like, so that's that. So I think the larger your audience and the more groups of people that your work can reach, I think it's the better. Well, I think it's just better for you. I think it's also better for the society. I think it's better for people in general. As many people can read your work as possible. And I think that's better for society in general.
That really registers with me. I think when Terrell and I write, we always, as we're writing, there are moments where we probably get a little bit academic and we look at each other like, who is our audience? And we made a commitment to ourselves, like, we're trying to write to Big Mama. and Peepaw, those type of people that can access our articles, our blogs, and they can digest it, right? You don't have to be a PhD to understand the writing, because we're trying to make a difference and make a change. And I think that, while we were reading your book, Keeping It Real, for one, you kept it real. So the title is exactly what's in the book. And I appreciated that, because there are many times when you read the title and you read the piece, it's like it doesn't align. And we read the introduction, man, I was like, I think there was a couple of paragraphs I just had to tell, like, let's stop for a minute. Let's think about this, because it is real. It is honest. And the audience I believe I know the audience you're speaking to, and you speak to that audience.
Well, the reviews for the book, fortunately for me, were very, very good. If you go to the University of Chicago website, it says, somebody actually compared me to James Baldwin and W.B. Du Bois. I was like, oh my goodness. I was like, woo. I was like, I think I almost fainted when I read that. I was like, oh my goodness, you put me in a company with those two men, I'm going to tell you. I might have found that person, I'd have reached to the screen and gave him a big hug. But I was like, but I think that, but all the reviews were really, positive about the book. And I was really appreciated that. And, like I said, and I feel that, like I said, the total of the book, because these past decade has been a very, very revelatory time for America. Not so much for a lot of Black people, younger Black people, perhaps. But I think because I don't think most of us are really that naive to, at least Black people by generation, about race and how people have thought about Black people. We're not that naive. If you're of a certain age or older, you understand that. But you can be a younger Black person and may not necessarily have been blindsided. But I don't think it's just younger Black people. I think it's a lot of younger people of color in general. I think a lot of ethnic minorities have been kind of jilted over the past decade, realizing how that racism has affected them as well. As well. So and I think that that's why I wrote these essays. I thought, because I said we're in a very critical time. There was the post-Obama Trump years, and there was a backlash toward the first Black president of the United States. I mean, there are people who did not really, deeply resented the fact that we had a Black president. And it manifested itself in different ways, and how he was treated by certain segments of the politicians of different races, mostly white people, but in general. But I'm saying how he was treated as president, and the blatant disrespect, in some cases that but he kind of was very Jackie Robinson-esque in the sense that he, never said anything. He never took the bait, and I feel that it was just something he had the temperament to deal with that, because like I said, I think most people would not have been able to have tolerate those levels of slights and things as well. And I think that he was determined, I guess, I'm going to not sure, I think he was always mindful of the fact that, like, I am the first here, I've got to set a good example, and I can't, probably say what I really want to think, like you said. Remember that, what was it on Key and Peele, when they had that, the guy who was Obama's alter ego, he would say what Obama really wanted to say. I forget his name, but that was funny. He was like, Obama would be like calm, and then he was on Comedy Central, he'd break into this, real, say what Obama really wanted to say. But I think that's the times we're living in. It wasn't, like I said, essays. You see some of the essays there. There was one about Roseanne Barr and Bill Maher and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So I read about a variety of people. And issues and stuff as well. So and people are not Black as well. But I mean, but it is all the essays deal with race in one angle or another, and that's what, like I said, was keeping it real. And I feel that in this society right now, I think we really have no choice. I think that you can't put your head in the sand, because we're in a civil war. I mean, I'm a historian by training, and people have asked me, do you feel? I said, yeah, I think we're history. Mark Twain said it best. History does not exactly repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And I'd say right now, there are a lot of troubling things that happened in the 1850s that are happening today. Talk of secession. James Buchanan was president. Trump was kind of by Buchanan, because Buchanan is considered the worst president we've ever had. He was erratic, undisciplined, and talk of secession, and the Know Nothing Party, heightened anti-intellectualism, a blatant disregard for government. I mean, we're seeing all that kind of transform itself, and all those things happened during the 1850s. After that, we went into a civil war, and one could argue we're in a civil war right now. Now, I don't see a war between the states, but I do see a war right now. We're in a culture war right now. We're seeing a war right now in many ways. And immigration's a big issue. It was kind of a big issue in the 1850s as well. But we're seeing, the immigration issues as well. The xenophobia that we saw then, as well. So, I mean, it's there's a lot of similarities that were taking place at that time that are reoccurring today.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, we could see that probably, to your point, if you take the political perspectives that are commonly in conflict, and maybe it's Republican, Democrat, maybe it's liberal, conservative, whatever, left, right, and then you sort of draw a line along the map of the states. I mean, you could imagine that they do fall along some state lines, although I think there's, splintered support for one or the other side in all of our states and territories. But so that's the first piece. The second piece you said about, reading the review that compares you to James Baldwin and others, contrary to popular belief, it's taking complex concepts and making them simple. That is genius. I mean, you could take anything complicated and say it complicated where no one can understand it. And I don't know that that necessarily reflects a level of genius. But when you can talk about really difficult contemporary issues, and like we said, anyone pick up the book and go, there is a level of genius and artistry and mastery there. And Jaquin mentioned it, the introduction. Let's go there. And the introduction of the 2019 book is what we want to talk about first. You say, and I quote, "The United States as a nation is in a perpetual state of crisis when it comes to the racial situation plaguing our nation." You wrote that in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
So first, it's now 2025. Do you, Dr. Elwood Watson, believe this statement still rings true? And given the ongoing struggle, do you see any signs of meaningful progress?
Well, to answer the first part of the question, yes. I still think we're in a perpetual state of crisis. And I think we're definitely, I think there are people who are responding to it in different ways. I feel that the Democratic Party in and of itself is going to have to become more aggressive in speaking to the people. One of the reasons I think Trump was so successful in garnering people from different groups who are normally Democrats, who vote Democratic rather, is because the economy was where it was at. But he also, say what you want to say about Trump, but Trump speaks to, he's got a gift to being able to tap into people's emotions. The Democrats, for the most part, tend to be very technocrats. If I'm saying, when it comes to politics, that doesn't always work with people. Okay, it might work with a small group of people, but people want plain, as you were saying in the book, as we say sometimes in the Black community, people want you to break it down and make it, palatable to what they can understand. Or like you said, keeping it real. And that's not even just Black people. That's white people and people and people in general. They want something that's simple, simplistic, and that they can understand. Trump speaks in that language, even though he may be a billionaire and he's very wealthy, but he connects to the people's emotions, whereas Democrats tend to be very, very policy oriented and very, very, I remember like one example in 2004, George W. Bush was running for re-election his second term. And he goes, "We're going to make America better today." Whether, people can understand that. But John Kerry, his running mate, was like, "Well, we have to work on trying to edify the municipal tax credit." I was like, people are like, what are you talking about? The average person can't understand that. A lot of it, those kind of words, you're not speaking. You got to speak in a way that people can understand and can relate to. And then for most Americans, it's kitchen table issues. It's kitchen table issues, healthcare, groceries. And I think that's what, it's the economy in many ways. They're not really concerned about, you can't tell people that the economy is really, the stock market's doing good and stuff if they don't feel it. They're saying, well, I don't feel it, and I don't see it in my paycheck. I'm struggling to make ends meet. And you can't, and I think the Democrat Party, some people almost saw that as somewhat insulting. How could you tell me that I know my situation? I know what was going on in my life, and but you're telling me, this is not the case, and da. Theoretical, and people, and I think there's a certain degree of cognitive dissonance in reality that kind of is hurting the party in many ways. And I'm not a Democrat myself. I'm not a Republican either. I'm an independent. but I do have more Democratic leanings. But I do feel the party right now needs a major reconstruction. And the Republican Party, I mean, it's gone. I mean, that's Trump. That's not even, you might as well call it the Trump Party. I mean, that's what it is. It's the Trump Party. Okay, that's what
Mhm.
it is. I mean, he's got it. I mean, he's King Trump in the Republican Party, as I see it. So I think that, but the Democratic Party, I think if they want to maintain a viable competitiveness, they're going to have to really do some serious soul searching, because I think too many people are under the impression, well, I think even some Democrats, if, Trump makes blunders and things, which he's already doing, in 2026, the public will come back to us. And I'm not, they might do it in 2026, but I'm not convinced long term that's going to be the case, because I think the American public is very fed up with both parties. I think they feel that both parties are not addressing their interests, their issues, their concerns. And I think we're in the rise. I wouldn't be surprised in the next 4 or 5 years, certainly by 2032, maybe even 2028, that we won't see the rise of a third party in this country. Maybe even 4 or 5, because we've had more than 2 parties, major parties in the United States in the past. But I think if things continue to go down this road, I think you're going to see a number of people, particularly Gen Zers and people like that, who are going to be very eager to start a viable third or perhaps even fourth party. And I think that, and I don't think we're that far away from that. And people might say that sounds dramatic, but no, we've had it in the past, and I have no reason to believe that that could not happen again.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's one thing Obama did extremely well during his when he was running for presidency, is that he could relate to the people. He was speaking in a plain English, plain language, where no matter where you are, you can understand what his message was. And I think Democrats, especially for this past few years, is they speak in political language, and the average person cannot understand, compared to Trump, where, I mean, I'm not gonna say it's a full, complete sentence, but you can pick up what he's putting down in so many ways. But what steps do you believe are necessary to break this cycle and create sustainable change?
The cycle for, you mean the dissatisfaction, or?
Mm-hmm.
I would say, well, first of all, the public right now, too many people feel they have no stake in the America in the future. The American dream for a lot of people, as they see it, is gone. I mean, you got people saying they're working. I remember when I even got there here in the late '90s and stuff. I remember people say, "Well, I only have like $100 left over. I have so much, but I got all my bills paid." Now you got people saying they're going to work and they can't even pay their bills. And I think that's not going to sustain itself. I mean, people who are going to work and can't pay their bills, or they have to go to, cash, what is it, payday advance loan places, or whatever those places are. I mean, those kind of things are going to have to really, people are feeling they're swimming upstream, and they just simply cannot survive in this particular economy. And I think there's just corporations are having far too much influence on our society. Corporate America has always had some say in the policies of America, but the danger right now and the problem is corporate America is running America. Okay, they're the ones. I mean, credit cards, 30% interest on a credit card. I mean, really? I mean, those kind of things. And certain companies have little disclaimers in there. If you have to look at the fine print, you're not able to sue us, or if you do, you can only get this amount of money. I mean, they rewrote those laws about 20 years ago. I'm just saying, to me, it's just got to the point where the consumer has really no say. I do believe we're going to have to start producing more in the United States, because when I was a little boy, when I went into the stores and stuff, you would see things like said "Made in the USA." You would see those things on there, and I can't remember the last time I've seen that. We've become a nation of consumers, but we're going to have to become more a nation of producers, and that way, that by producing, that produces jobs, puts people back in factories, and puts people back, and our economy will be more sustained. Because right now, everything's being exported. Everything's exported, and everything's imported. The jobs overseas, and we're importing here, which means we're basically a nation of consumers. And I think that's not going to be effective for any economy. And I'm not a bona fide economist, but I can tell you this much, that you do have to be a nation of producers if you want to have a viable, workforce and a viable economy and a decent standard of living for your people.
Love it. That is so more than we could even ask for in that question. I mean, for anybody, y'all out there listening, what y'all think? Feel free to drop some things in the chat and tell us what you think. I'm going to move us forward, because there's another essay in your book, and it's a marvelous kind of approach to a book, to have these um, almost individual essays. And we didn't really talk about this much, but I have a question about chapter 14. We have a question about chapter 14. So how did you do this? You write essays and sort of collect them over time, and then at some point put them all in a book. You sit down to write 14 different essays. How did you
First part.
assemble the book?
The first part, like I said, actually it was somebody else. Somebody said, you write such good, interesting stuff. You should probably, try to get these into a book. I said, well, thank you, I appreciate it, and that's what I do. I mean, and I always write about what's going on in society at the time. I always, with the news. But then I obviously, throw historical references into the essays and and enhance them before, and that way make them more, open to a larger audience. But that's what I do. Like I said, over time I collect essays, like I said, and say, and review what I've written, and then and I assemble them, categorize them, and then and are able to take them from there.
That's smart. So there's no way you could have known this, of course, in 2019 when you wrote the book, but you assigned chapter 14 to Black History Month. And here we are now in 2025 at a time where Black History Month and its celebration is not only contested, right? Even since we've sent the questions to you and we're fortunate to book you on this episode, we have now where at least the Google Calendar does not recognize Black History Month. It's been taken out, and along with many other heritage days. So in chapter 14, you write, and we quote, "What we are seeing now is blatant and undisguised bigotry of the type that we have not seen since the 1950s, or at least the early 1960s, being unleashed and allowed to unapologetically permeate itself in various sectors of our society, in many cases with no consequences." Can you say more about this, especially for those who don't remember the 1950s, 1960s? They weren't alive. Their teachers didn't do a good job of teaching them about it. Tell us about the 50s and 60s and what you see going on. And we have a follow-up question to that.
Okay. Well, yeah, the 1950s, in 1954, Brown versus the Board of Education was, established by the Supreme Court. But then the following year, they said, Brown won, which was all deliberate speed, which could mean 1 year, 10 years, whatever. But I think that the 1950s was a time of legal segregation. It was a time where, restaurants and hotels and other places of, public services could deny you the right to, right to enter, the right for you to stay at a hotel, or you could be deprived the right to stay at a hotel, deprived the right to attend a university, deprived the right to bank at a certain place. I mean, it was legal at that time to be able to discriminate against someone based on their race. And that was, in a lot of cases, in the South in particular, that occurred well into the 60s. Just because the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed, it didn't mean people automatically were willing to change. Especially in smaller and rural areas, rural towns, they, it might have been on paper, but laws in many ways are just like, so what it was saying, they're words on papers. They have to be enforced. Okay, just because it's on paper doesn't mean that people are going to necessarily follow it unless it's really enforced. So you had a lot of resistance toward any type of integration. And in the 50s was a time of real legal discrimination and violence against people of color, not just within the South, in the North and other parts of the nation as well. In the North, it was a little different in the sense you had that de facto segregation. In the sense, you certainly had violence and police brutality and those type of things all throughout the nation. But in the North, it was blacks could shop in certain neighborhoods in like Dearborn, Michigan, and places like that, but they couldn't live there. So it was like, that kind of, you could, work there during the day, maybe. And there's some of these workplaces were integrated during the day. But when you went home, when it was time to go home, you went home to the black neighborhood or the Latino neighborhood or the white neighborhood. So that North was a little more, like I said, de facto in that sense. And also, too, in the North, it was like, they weren't going to say, like in the South, we're not going to tell you can't live here. We're just going to make it so expensive that you can't afford it. Okay. So, I mean, that happened in a lot of ways, too. So, yeah, gerrymandering and, redlining was even more so. So those kind of things were happening in the North. So it was a very more sophisticated type of racism. And it was, whereas in the South, which is more black neighborhoods, white neighborhoods, no, you can't live here. If necessary, we'll institute violence to make sure you won't. What I mean? So that was kind of a much more of a more, just blatantly black and white type of violence, literally, that you saw in the South in many cases. And so that's where, and then the Northwest and places like Northern New England, the black populations were so minimal. Individuals in those states faced racism too, like anywhere else, but it wasn't an issue. I mean, it was more not as much. It was not as much of an issue because black populations in Maine, Vermont, or Oregon, Idaho. I mean, there were very few black people living out there. As a matter of fact, in the black populations in those states, even today, probably not many. Latinos were the largest minorities in those states. You can find many more Latinos in New Mexico, Arizona, Idaho, and Native Americans than you would black people as well. And then in northern New England, you're going to find a lot of French Canadians, and at that time, even today. And black populations are pretty much concentrated in the South, the Midwest, and then even in the Midwest, they're more in urban areas. The Northeast a little more spread out, but St. Louis in the Midwest, St. Louis, Chicago, Milwaukee, Detroit. But if you go to a place like Iowa, North Dakota, I mean, a lot of these rural areas, there's very, very few. Here in Tennessee, where I'm living right now, East Tennessee is the black population of East Tennessee is not really that large, and not the people would think. The farther west you go, it is. But even then, pockets. You got blacks in pockets of the state. You got Memphis, Nashville, maybe Murfreesboro, Knoxville, but you go 25, 20 miles outside of some of these big cities, some of these towns are predominantly white. I mean, they're not, they're not as many, they're not as diverse as you think. Even in a place like Tennessee, you got people, you got black populations in pockets of the states, but you go to a lot of these small towns, they're almost virtually all white. At least I would think overwhelmingly white. That's been my experience. So I'm saying that that's so you have even today, like you did then, you're having that kind of de facto, the segregation. And I would always say, as society, America's never really been an integrated society. Legally, yes, we're integrated, but I would say we're more of a desegregated society as opposed to an integrated society. And I think there is a difference. I think we're desegregated, but I'm not sure we're integrated. And I think that was what a lot of black people, older black people in particular, maybe, I don't know about younger, but I think a lot of older black people, that's what they were fighting for to begin with. I don't think most black people were fighting for integration as much as they were fighting for desegregation. And I think that, like the ability to go and come where they wanted to go, without being told you can't do this, you can't do that, and I think and there's a difference. I mean, desegregation, does give you that freedom, but it's not necessarily integration either, if I'm making any sense.
Oh,
are you making sense? What? Yes.
Sense.
Yes. We just had this conversation, didn't we?
Yeah, we just had this conversation with an older than us African American woman who said the same thing, exactly those words. That from her perspective, that was never the goal of the efforts in the 50s and 60s. It was to have equal rights. And like you said, to be free to come and go without violence and hurt, harm, and threat of death. But, and somehow we went to this. And we all followed up, and that was a cross-generational conversation at that point to say, isn't that interesting? Although we call ourselves an integrated society, we're really not. I mean, our neighborhoods are still segregated. Our church places of worship are still segregated. Many of our colleges and universities are segregated. And so, to your point, it's a timely conversation. What were you going to say, Jaquin?
First of all, I think I'm just more inspired. I think I want to know more about, from your perspective, how do we miss that? About the goal wasn't to be integrated, but to have access to the education, access to the grocery stores, access to the parks, and etc. Tell us more about your perspective on that. Because listen, the first time I heard like our goal, see, I didn't get taught that. I did not get taught that in school. No, my history teacher did not say the goal was not to integrate. Did not say that.
Well, yeah, I mean, what happened is that because of the schools, we were always told about integration. And I think, there were people who definitely were genuinely want to integrate. And I don't think, myself, I don't think integration is a bad thing. I'm not saying it's a negative, but let me get that clear. I'm just saying, to me, I think a lot of older blacks didn't necessarily want to, their goal was to desegregate, because I don't think they really felt that they, the whites would ever really would believe in any integration in any sustained way. And I also think they also believe that, a lot of them, their experiences with white people were just so negative. Why would they probably want to integrate with them with any kind of meaningful, any kind of, intense, have any kind of intense relationship with these individuals? So I think they, like I said, they wanted desegregation to do it, like I said, to do what they wanted. They had the freedom to do what they wanted to do without any kind of, restrictions or constraints upon them. So that's what I think was there. But the school always said integration, integration, integration. And I think that's because they were taught. And I don't think they thought about, they didn't realize that there was a step between integration before it could also be seen as desegregating. And I think all of us were just told it's either integration or segregation. We didn't think about that center step, right? That intermediate step, which is kind of desegregation between them. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah. And I think that's the situation between integration and segregation, desegregation. That's how I see it. And I feel we were never taught that in school because it was almost like black and white, like the race. It's either this or it's either that. And that gray area has never really been taught. And the history has a lot of gray areas, quite frankly. And we never, it's either like this or it's like that. And you can't, that's what I say in my classes. No, I said, no. But to people one guy told me, he goes, well, history is very objective. And I said, no, it's not. I said, history is very subjective. I said, it's objective in the fact that events happen. I said, but how you interpret those events is up to you. I said, right now, I could write a book on the 60s. You could write a book on the 60s and come to two totally different conclusions because of our own personal experiences, who we are, how we look at things. History is through the eyes who writes it. I mean, the term itself, his story, that's what it means, his story, her story, their story, our story. That's what the term comes from. It derives from, that's why it's from his story. So I'm saying, we all have our own life stories. So, and I think individual histories. So, I mean, if anybody ever tells you history is very, very objective, no, tell them no, history is very subjective, okay? It is not objective, it's very subjective. You know what I mean? So.
You're tracking tonight, Dr. Watson, because I was just going to say, thinking before you got there, I was like, if you look at the word history, it is his story.
Correct.
And so much of history, before, quite frankly, women historians started doing the work, missed her story. And so much of his story was written by white men that until historians like yourself and others, it was it missed the contributions of people of color, especially African Americans, to it. And so I was thinking about what you said, Jaquin, and one, I think another, to tell the story of racial relations and to admit that integration was never the goal, that desegregation would have been the goal, all rights and privileges due to the people. It requires one of the races to admit to some of the harm and the trauma and the devastation that integration did to the Black community. I know in education, my history teacher didn't talk about it either. But fortunately, my history teacher in high school was not my last history teacher. And so as I started reading from Black historians, I realized how many Black teachers lost their jobs when schools integrated. It wasn't that, Black teachers kept their jobs and they were starting to teach Black and white kids. It was like most of the Black kids were sent to white schools. The Black teachers lost their jobs, principals and superintendents as well. And white educators and leaders stayed in power. And that was a devastation, right, to the education community, especially the Black educated leaders. Same is true for what happened in business and industry. And I just think about so much of what you have in your essay, Dr. Watson, speaks to that reality. I know we're coming up on time, and I know, Jaquin, you got a question. So I do have one follow-up, but go right ahead.
One quick thing I want to mention before you get is actually some of the strongest opponents toward integration were the Black elite in some cases, places like Mississippi and Richmond, Virginia, and places like that as well, because of that reason. They realized themselves, they thought they were going to be, segregation to a certain extent, they benefited because preachers and teachers and the Black elite, they were looked up to in the Black community at that time. And I think so there was some of the most resistance toward integration did come from people like that. They were not necessarily the Black middle class in the South really was not involved in those civil rights struggles. It was Black college students. It was Black, young people and stuff as well, and stuff, because a lot of them really didn't see integration as anything that they wanted to aspire to. I mean, because of their own status in society. But I just want to make that clear,
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
helpful.
No, I didn't
You
have a
say?
question. I was just thinking of the education class that you taught about segregation and desegregation and so forth. And you and I watched a video about Ruby Bridges. And her mother said that she didn't have an issue with the black teachers. She thought they were phenomenal and did a great job teaching her child. The issue she had was that she had to walk so far
Mhm,
and go past so many schools just to get to her school.
mhm.
So that's what they wanted to address and try to overcome.
Right.
So all these conversations now, it makes sense. It's coming to like the dots are connecting.
Yeah, because
And
you
there
think
were some
about it,
black teachers who were able. There were some black teachers who did certain parts of the nation did actually go to ended up in integrated schools.
Mhm. I was going to say, you think about how much money we spend, or maybe not now since the new administration is in place, but how much money we spend on teaching teachers how to teach Black children, how to teach students of a different race through culturally relevant pedagogy and responsive pedagogy, and a lot of that is an outgrowth of the fact that we sent kids to schools with teachers who couldn't see their genius and their cultural wealth, and now we removed the teachers who did see that naturally. So we created this by thinking we're solving one problem, we created a set of others for everyone to go to think through. Dr. Watson, question. So you've called our attention to these problems and challenges of today, and we're not even really going as hard as we could about the current administration, right? But we want to push you on this last question, sort of think about it. So all that you're seeing, you've helped us think about it. We've seen this before, right? Whether it's Buchanan or whatever since. Talk to us a little bit about that history, this anti-intellectualism, anti abuse of government and governmental powers. But then if you could share with us, what lessons from the past can we draw from in the present that can help our audience think about what they can do? We get calls and emails and texts saying, what can we do? Can we protest? Can we march? What did they do back then that today's people need to be thinking about as we think about how to resist, especially right here on the eve of what would be called President's Day?
Well, America has always had a long streak of anti-intellectualism. Jacksonian America in the 19th century was very anti-intellectual. It was known as Jacksonian America, so that was always been there. What people in the 19th century did, they, like I said, you had abolitionists, had people who, fought to John Brown and people like that. I mean, he was more radical, obviously, but I'm saying that Frederick Douglass, you had people who, wrote in newspapers and, as well. Today we have what you call the internet that we did not have then. I think the internet can be a godsend. It can also be a double-edged sword because it can also be used by people who have more sinister intentions to promote their goals. But we can also still use it for positive change. I feel as far as getting certainly getting on school boards, running for public office, getting on your local, that's where the right has done a very good job of populating. Local government is what's going to really affect you the most. And I think a lot of times the Democrat Party has missed the goal. If we just have the Supreme Court and as long as we win the presidency, that's we'll be good to go. Well, no, you got to worry about your local government, your state government. We want to make sure you populate those as well, because that's going to really affect your children's education, your tax base, and everything else. So we need to get more involved in getting people in the politics. Protesting by all means. Look, I'm not deriding any kind of protest. Protest is okay, but protesting, you can protest until the cows come home. If you're not in power and people are not in power, why would I care about you protesting if I've got all the power? And I mean, I'm the one who's making the laws, and you don't have any power. I mean, what good is that going to do you? I mean, you got to be able to put people in office that are going to address, and that comes to politics, that are going to address your concerns and interests. Because as long as the opposition is in power and they see you as no threat, they just let them protest. They don't care about these protests. I mean, it's like, it's almost like akin to student protest on college campuses. I mean, I know I shouldn't say this probably, but the reality is administrators, the board of trustees and and Dow Chemical and all them come there and start, but they're gonna listen to them. But you think they care about 18, 19, 20-year-old students? They laugh at them. I mean, behind closed doors, they like, oh, we take you serious. I mean, they go out there, we're gonna address your concerns stuff. I mean, when they get back to the office, they just laugh. Oh, please, that little snotty little kid, I mean, that's what they're probably saying. Let's just keep it real. I mean, like my book said, I mean, they're not gonna. You got to have people that you got to get yourself in a position where you're going to have people that where you're going to be taken seriously. And I think that starts off by getting in office, running for local office, running for school boards, and I think sometimes performative. That's the word people use now. Protesting. A lot of times the left is good at theater and some aspects of it, but it's going to take more than that. You got to have more than passion. Passion in and of itself is not going to, passion's okay, but it's got to be performance. Okay, performance means you've got to perform, and that means getting on school boards, writing letters to your local TV stations, your local politicians. Which has really been happening over the past couple of weeks. Look how those. The Democrat, they didn't go out there for when they saw all that pressure, they got all the people started calling up in there and stuff as well. Look, you all better get up off your butts and do something. Trump is running roughshod over it. What are you all doing? You had Schumer coming out there talking about, well, this is illegal. Well, we know that. The point is, what are you all doing? I mean, like John Stewart said, we know that. We call it Chuck. We know that, Chuck. I mean, it's not enough just because I say something's illegal. That's like telling your child, when they got arrested for Stevens, well, you shouldn't have stole that. Well, that's a given. But the point is that what is the alternative? What are you guys going to do? And I feel that there's got to be more proactive there. And I think, like I said, it's going to be a combination of youth people getting in office, people beginning to challenge the system. I think that there's just going to have to be a reckoning. I think in the next couple of years, I think we're kind of at that stage. I think you're going to see a major revolution in some ways about where where the nation is going, because I think a lot of people feel that the country is going the wrong way. A lot of people did not vote in 2024. Okay, and when you vote for a president, people don't realize you're not just voting for a president. Some people don't realize that you're voting for potential Supreme Court justices. You're voting for federal judges. You're voting for somebody who can act all type of executive orders. I mean, it's a whole slew of things. Just not be And I think people learned that lesson the hard way in 2016 when they didn't vote for Hillary Clinton. I'm not voting for Hillary because Bernie's my man. I was like, well, that's all and good, but the reality is, had they voted for Hillary Clinton, we probably would not be. Some of the things that we're dealing with right now probably would not have come to pass. And I think so. A lot of times, and I think that this is like this kind of one guy told me, he said, well, I'm not going to vote because I'm not. I said, well, you don't, but not voting is not really necessarily, certainly not going to, stand away from the political system and keep yourself outside as an outsider. I don't see how that's going to gain you any kind of any power in the system. You got to work within it and do some of the things I think I've suggested, like get on school boards and writing your congressmen and running people for office, public office, who are committed to change and those type of things as well. I think that pooling your organizations, money, and developing organizations that are progressive in nature or certainly are conducive to the ideas that you want. And I feel as well, those are the kind of things they're going to really have to start. And I think you're kind of seeing that with a lot of Gen Zers and even younger millennials and stuff as well. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that as well. I think young men are also another issue. That's another whole podcast in and of itself. But I think but with young men, I think there's a lot of Trump did very well among young men across the board. The majority of black men did vote for Kamala Harris, but he made pretty good inroads among black men too. Certainly with Hispanic men he did, and white men and others as well. But I feel that that's an issue we're gonna have to look at too. Why are so many young men? I have my reasons why I feel they are, why they aspire to Trump. But I think that as well. But I think that that's something that's another whole podcast and stuff. but I feel that I think that's something that's gonna have to be addressed too. The issues that are facing men and men of color and stuff as well.
We don't even get a preview. Just a little bit of your explanation for what help America understand this.
I gotta know.
They're like, we're not gonna let you go without asking that question. That's a Terrell and Jaquan. But I would say what a lot of it with Donald Trump, I think he kind of Donald Trump, he's the kind of man that a lot of younger men in particular aspire to be. He's got the beautiful wife, he's got money, he's got, he's the kind of like that James Bond-esque, and he's everything they're aspiring to. He's the kind of man they would like to be. He's lawless, which he can get. He does give you a lot of stuff. He's able to do. He does a lot of things that they, he's rich. He's got a beautiful wife. He's got all these, You got all these homes, everything else. These are things that a lot of young men would like to aspire to, regardless of economic race or class, and that
Wow.
and that includes men of color. That's why I think he resonates with a lot of young men.
Do you have a microphone in your office that you can grab and drop real quick for us? Because
You know?
yeah, you just linked it back to masculinity.
Right, and
Wow.
I thought it comes right back down to that. I mean, like I said, and I think a lot of men, sexism is a problem that runs across, men of all races.
Mhm.
I mean, even within the civil rights movement. I mean, Martin Luther King Jr. and those men were sexist. I mean, in a lot of ways. I mean, Septima Clark, in her book Ready from Within, she writes at length about sexism within the civil rights movement, and other stuff as well. And not just in the black movements, even the so-called liberal movement, Students for a Democratic Society, SDS. The women did the more secretarial works, and the guys were out there. These women themselves complained about the hippies and like that. They said the women would complain that all they were always asked to do the secretarial stuff, had the meals and things ready when they got home and stuff. But where the men they always were relegated. So I mean, even in the supposedly liberal organizations, you saw that sexism there as well. So I'm saying that sexism's been a problem, across racial lines. That's not, throughout history. But I'm saying, within the civil rights movement and anything else, even though we've heard of Rosa Parks and we've heard of people like that, but those women were largely, workers behind the scenes, but they were subordinate. And, there was a lot of issues within the civil rights movement within of itself. I think that I write essays in there. One of my essays in the black community, I think, was about homophobia in the black community. I mean, that was an issue. Bryant Rustin, a movie came out about him last year. He got an Oscar nomination for it. I mean, he was a genius behind the civil rights movement, the March on Washington. He was, sidelined because a lot of black preachers didn't want him out there and stuff as well, because they felt he would discredit and all of it, anti gay prejudice stuff. But I'm saying, I mean, as I put in one of my essays, I said, can you imagine a society without James Baldwin, who we mentioned earlier in this conversation? I mean, take James Baldwin out of black culture. Take Algie Lord. People are quoting her after her death 30 plus years. The war against the dehumanization is ceaseless. The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. I mean, that woman was, my goodness, she was phenomenal. I mean, Lorraine Hansberry, first bisexual, first black woman to ever play on George Washington Carver. I'm just saying, like, you could go, on and on. I mean, you get a whole slew of people, Langston Hughes. I mean, I'm saying that, there were a whole slew of black individuals in our community, as I put there, who, take those individuals out of black culture. Look at the void we would have if they weren't existing, And I'm just saying, and I think that, so we within the black community, we have our own, some of the things we have to deal with internally and stuff too, issues that, that are there. And that's, and again, that's not exclusively a black problem. I mean, we know that that's not exclusive, but I'm just saying, but that those things, I think, that come in, but we have to be more willing to, be open-minded. And also, I think the left is kind of overreached. When I say overreached, about the cancel culture and things like that as well. I mean, like, people would get mad with you if you use the wrong pronoun and all that, or that's not a child. I had to tell one more time, that he's a child. Okay, that little kid is 6 years old. That is a child. I'm not being disrespectful to him, but he's not a pre-adult. He's not all these kind of fancy names you all want to call him. He's a child. Okay, so I mean, just because the names at the end of the day, that's an easy way out. I mean, that takes away from doing the hard work that really needs to be done. And I think that's one of the issues with DEI. The Trump of them are trying to pervert it. But the reality is with DEI is diversity initiatives are very obviously, I'm pro diversity because it's important. But I do think sometimes they can be problematic in how to implement it. And I feel that are these programs really doing? Are they really effective in what they're supposed to be doing? And I feel that's who are they really benefiting at the end of the day? I mean, because the end of the result is just a few black and Latino and LGBTQ white people getting jobs. Okay, that's all and good, but is that really helping the masses? And I think we got to make sure that it's really trickling down where it's really supposed to be doing what it's supposed to be, what we say it's supposed to, to make effect and real change. Because after George Floyd in 2020, 5 years ago now, it was a lot of corporations and things like that as well. I said, don't get too wrapped up in the symbolism. Yeah, we know the power of symbolism. Symbolism can be important, but yes, I don't know. We should not have statues of Nathan Bedford Forrest and people in downtown, but you put them in a museum. Of course, you don't want swastikas outside on downtown or whatever, but they need to be in a museum because people need to know that history. You got people who just want to wipe it out history. No, you don't wipe out history. You just historical. They need to be there because people need to know their history. And also, too, when companies they donate what 20. I mean, because let's go beyond that. That's all in good, but let's not stop there. I mean, yes, the statue's removed, but 6 months later, has things really changed for the community? Probably not. I mean, you got that statue gone. It might be in a museum or wherever the case will be. But these corporations come out, they were donating $20 million to this, or I mean, places like Hershey's or McDonald's. I mean, that's pennies for what those companies make. You know what I'm saying? That's not. And I mean, they'll do those symbolic gestures, but I mean, that's okay. But at the end of the day, let's worry about substance. Let's not to worry. Let's get beyond that. I said, we need things like, these companies promoting internships for college students, as well, aggressive affirmative action programs, helping, employees, first time home buyer. Those are the kind of things that are going to be more tangible down the road that are going to be much more tangible to the community at large. And that's where, wealth can develop and everything else. But just, to an apology, okay, that's a given, but that's all the night. But that apology is not doing anything. That's not benefiting anybody long term. Okay, that's all good. You know what I'm saying? But and removing a statue, and but all that symbolism and things like holidays like Juneteenth, which I have no problem with the holiday. That's good. But my point is, okay, they pass a holiday, but what else is that doing? I mean, you got one day off. Okay, we do whatever you want if you don't go to work. But is that really helping? Is that really moving Black America forward? Or is that really moving any community forward? I mean, and I think sometimes we get too wrapped up in the, these symbolic gestures as opposed to, as I think, demanding more substantial gestures that I think are really much more tangible down the road.
Let me see here. Can I?
God, thank you.
Wow, we have got to have you back on the show. This has been a dynamic conversation. So before we wrap up, I mean, Jaquan, what do you want people to take from tonight? What would you say to the audience?
My heart is full. I mean, I want to write. I want to write, and heart is full, and it was a really good conversation. And I was texting Terrell before, make sure we're on one accord before I say this live, is that you are more than welcome back. I mean, we have to have another conversation. Good conversation. I think, Black history, we got some gems about that. We got gems about what the goal was for segregation. What was that the goal? Juneteenth, I think that the last one, like Juneteenth, is symbolic. What does it really do? How does it help Black people move forward? And then we said this time and time again, and you kind of affirmed it here, is that we have to be a part of school board and local government, and we need to vote every single time. If you have the right to vote, go vote, because it impacts you regardless. Like you said, like, although you don't vote, it's not like you can just, not be a part of it. It's going to impact you in some way, in some form. So
too many African Americans lost their lives just for the right to vote. Okay. Yep. Your ancestors, your great grandmothers, and everybody else, and people who didn't even know you, fought, put their lives in jeopardy and everything else for you to vote. So yes, take your Black behind to the polls
and vote. So, and that being said, take your behind to go vote. I know that's just the real talk. That's what's in the book. We're going to tweet that out shortly, Dr. Watson, because the book is really good. And, I know Terrell and I are committed to completing that book because it's very inspiring. And it really speaks to some of the things that we're seeing today.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. Like I said, I'm glad to have it. And I didn't know you were in Johnson City, Jaquan, so I got to meet up with you.
Yes, we have to.
And like I said as well. So, but I feel that this is great. And Terrell, when everything gets situated, no rush. I didn't know what was going on with the situation, but I would like to speak with you at some point. Like I said.
Oh, we're gonna make it happen. We're gonna finish the book. We're gonna have you back. And to everyone who's listening, we hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as we did. You're right that maybe history does not repeat itself. It does have a rhyme from time to time. But we do know there's another phrase out there that says that those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Exactly. And so what we've learned in this podcast is some people will read the book, some people won't read the book, they'll read the blog. Some people may not read the blog because they're going to look at social media. Some people won't look at social media because they'll watch the podcast. Our thing is, listen, we're not going to dictate what you do. Just do something. Don't be afraid to do something. And if you're going to do something, we like to say, do something good. this host of the show, co-host of the show. It's the podcast. It's our social media. It's the name of the company. Listen, friends, do good work. If you've been thinking about it, run for office. Write your elected officials. Watch this episode over again. If you found what we were so inspired by from Dr. Watson useful, share this link. Go to YouTube, go to Spotify, go to Facebook, go to LinkedIn, take that link, forward it to your supervisor. We've said this a million times. Those of you who supervise teams, and of course, we're hearing all sorts of directives from, we'll say, Washington, D.C., about what we should do in this month. It is a great way to celebrate Black History Month. Bring the team together, play this podcast, have people talk, share their perspectives, what they remember, what they've learned. You know, it takes change to change, and we don't get better just sitting on our hands. We got to get up and do something. So until next time, on behalf of Jaquin and I, we thank y'all for tuning in. Dr. Watson, thank you so much. We hope you get to go home. And until that time, friends, do good work.
Thank you for tuning in to Do Good Work Podcast. We hope you found today's conversation informative, uplifting, and insightful. Don't forget to like and share this episode with your networks. Follow us on social media at Do Good Work on X, formerly Twitter, for real-time updates, behind-the-scenes content, and so much more. Until next time, friends, don't be afraid to do something, but do something good. Do good work.
Okay. Be in touch. Have a good night, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.